Hi, I'm Dex Gelfand, and I'm here to speak about something related to my practice of therapeutic spiritual counseling. This will be of interest to all my friends with experience in Scientology. I also have had experience in Scientology. Anyway, I'm going to talk about I'm going to be using Scientology terms here, so please excuse me if you are not familiar with these, but you'd like to listen anyway. You're certainly welcome to do so, of course. What I'm going to talk about basically is about what in Scientology is called power processing, and how it is that power processing made the type of technique Scientology calls Dianetics. Power processing made Dianetics actually obsolete. How and why? Well, first of all, let's talk about Dianetics. Okay, Dianetics is the therapeutic approach that became popular back in 1950 with the book Dianetics, and at that time it was a craze. It was quite popular, and it did have its successes and its moments of miracles, and it was based on the idea of finding some traumatic incidents and then finding connected traumatic incidents that happened before and before and before to what's called one basic incident on what's called a chain of incidents, of all these related incidents. And through walking through these, in Scientology terms, returning to these occurrences and walking through them, there is relief, and the pain and discomfort and unwanted, unpleasant sensations are to be resolved. Of course, it worked better for some people than others. Of course, like many other things, it was promoted as being 100% effective with everybody, and there was quite a bit of hyperbole in L. Ron Hubbard's discussion in his writing about the effectiveness of it. But nevertheless, it actually did have a good number of successes, however imperfect. And in June of 1950, based on my research, what I've read of documents from that time, actually the best approach ever used in Dianetics occurred then. It was, in Scientology terms, the file clerk will now give us the incident necessary to resolve the case. And of course, what this means really is that we're going to bring forth the traumatic experience that has most impacted the person in a negative way. And this actually worked pretty well. They call what they call the file clerk, Dianetics describe as a servo mechanism we have that can be directed to give us what we want it to give us. Now, I've spent a lot of time describing how that's a misuse of what is I call our spiritual compass and our instinct to find exactly what we're looking for or what we need. But nevertheless, as I said, it had a certain amount of effectiveness. But this particular approach in Dianetics, and there were many iterations afterwards that were supposedly new and improved, but this was actually the most effective because it went right for what you most needed to address and resolve, and therefore it was the most effective thing. And every iteration of Dianetics that came after that, while it contained a good amount of what could be considered to be some very clever questions and steps and things like that to isolate the particular sensations and feelings that are related to the experience, they were actually less direct, actually took up far more time running these chains of incidents related to some sensation that was part of what was experienced in the incident, when what you're really looking to do is handle the entire negative energy and feeling of the incident. And that can be done by simply addressing the incident itself, if it in fact is one incident. Most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, there's any number of related experiences that essentially contain the same energy, the same feelings. And that's where we come to, in 1965, what Scientology calls power processing. And truth be told, even though Scientology materials don't state this. It was simply an updated form of what was called effort processing, where you would get the counter efforts of some experience containing pain and or fear or similar unwanted feelings. Counter efforts meaning the energies that were experienced in the traumatic incident and the person's own efforts to try to push it away, not feel it, make it go away, and so forth. So you have efforts and counter efforts. And when you just allow yourself or direct somebody to just be willing to sit and experience both sides of those efforts, do it well enough and long enough, most of the time, the condition that's being addressed that occurred in one or more incidents resolves nicely. It certainly diminishes. And so that was actually the principle that made power processing work. The original commands used in power processing were, tell me an existing condition, and then how was it handled? The existing condition being the unwanted energies or efforts coming from the traumatic experiences, and the how have you handled that being your counter efforts too. What have you tried to do about that? How have you tried to resolve it? How have you tried to not feel it, overwhelm it with other feelings or whatever you tried to do in marshaling your own energies to try to protect you from the unwanted feelings of the energies and efforts of the painful incident. So it was simply, tell me an existing condition. How was that handled? Tell me an existing condition. How was that handled? Back and forth, effort, counter effort, effort, counter effort. And done this way, typically it would eventually result in a huge spiritual liberation. It's actually quite effective most of the time. And this was even more direct than the file clerk will now give us the incident necessary to resolve the case. It resolved all of the energies related to the condition that's being processed, whereas Dianetics focused on some incident and related incidents. Why are they related? In reality, why the incidents are related is because they contain the same energies, the same frequency of feeling, and that's what connects them all. In Dianetics terms, is there an earlier similar incident, earlier similar, looking to get back to one basic point at which, when that is walked through well enough, all the effects, the traumatic feelings resolve and are gone. Okay, but power processing was far more direct and accomplished this to a much greater degree and without going through a wild goose chase through dozens of related sensations and God knows how many incidents and chains of incidents. See, as Dianetics progressed, and progressed not necessarily meaning towards improvement, but as it changed through the years, it always changed to add more time and more work before you were done resolving the original item that was being addressed. And this was promoted as being more thorough and more effective. And again, I'm not saying that it didn't get any good results. It certainly could and often did. But basically, it was a way of churning more people through more paid hours as compared to the original form of Dianetics, or as compared to, better yet, power processing. Power processing being so much more effective in employing that use of effort processing, the counter efforts, the counter energies that hold conditions in place. It creates kind of an impasse or a wall where these energies meet. In Scientology terms, that was called a ridge. Okay. Anyway, how power processing originally came about, and now I'm going back and repeating information from the lectures of John McMaster, who was instrumental in the development of the final forms of power processing as used by Scientology. Originally, what occurred was L. Ron Hubbard, in his St. Hill Manor in in England, where he, ran a center there where he was training people and giving lectures and so forth. He was having a conversation with someone, and the conversation was interrupted by a man who seemed to be unaware or disregarding of the fact that Hubbard and whoever else were in the middle of a conversation. Whatever was happening with this man, he was in such a condition that he simply wasn't present to understand what was going on around him, and just imposed whatever his mind was manifesting in conversation. So Hubbard turned and whispered to, I believe it was McMaster, take this guy and run him on this process. And it was the original form of power processing. It wasn't exactly what I just described. It had a third command, which was later eliminated, which I don't have right in front of me. But anyway, that's the story of the development, basically. And he left McMaster and his team of what were considered the best Scientology counselors or auditors in that place and time to test this out on numerous people. Some of the supposed conclusions, which were then issued as fact at that time, were that power processing could only be run once on a person, but at first it was run on everybody twice, and with good results. So this is another thing that was repeated in Scientology, where it would be decided that you had to make way or make room for what was considered to be the next levels to accomplish, so as to shorten whatever had more time spent on it. So apparently it was stated that it was mandatory to only run power processing once and only on certain people who qualified. Well, I'm here to tell you that I have run that process hundreds of times on many people, many more times than once. And regardless of what Scientology experiences, or in Scientology's terms, levels, I'm not a big believer in the idea of levels. But it impresses people. It's a really great marketing tool. That's what it is. Everybody wants to be better, and everybody wants to be better than everybody else, don't they? Well, anyway, I have had so much experience, hundreds of times, of running that process on people who never did Scientology, people who did the entire Scientology bridge, as they call it, all the techniques and processes. Regardless, and it's always been effective, without any drawbacks or problems afterward, with everybody. So that's the truth of it. Again, I believe it's for marketing purposes and to sell more time doing other things that this fairy tale was woven into the inarguable edicts of L. Ron Hubbard Scientology. But nevertheless, I think it was so effective that it had to be restricted so that we could keep the hamsters on the wheel, keep people paying for more and more Dianetics. I will say that so many people who spent $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, even $500,000 in the Church of Scientology, including having spent hundreds of hours running Dianetic chains of incidents, those people who spent those hundreds of hours, it has been observable to me that in sessions they penetrated the layers of their negative spiritual architectures with a little more efficiency than the average person as a result of all that experience going back through their tracks of time earlier and earlier to various incidents and walking through them. That it does or did accomplish, but not anywhere near to be worth all the time and money spent on it. Because just running things the way I do, people do accomplish the end result that they're looking for. And it doesn't take a series of sessions to get there. Not with this technique. Now, I have evolved that technique myself in a few different ways. One most important way is one of the things that is missing from the entire Scientology paradigm, or 99% missing at least, is the importance of recognizing and addressing the underlying positive goals and aspirations that drive us. And these are the things that make the negative conditions and the negative spiritual architectures negative in the first place, because they contradict, they oppose those aspirations and goals that we have to be great, to be happy, to succeed, to be highly functional, to be creative, and create great things, whatever these aspirations and goals may be. Okay, to feel wonderful, to be elated, to be in a state of serenity or enthusiasm, and things that make us feel otherwise or get in the way or make us feel incapable or dysfunctional. Okay, these things are negatives with fear and pain attached to them only because of the contradiction with the underlying positive goals. So I have part of my evolution of the technique that Scientology calls power processing has been to spend equal focus on the underlying desirable positive conditions, connecting with those, feeling those, the energies of those highly positive conditions. And let me just stress, the positive, as I explained to my participants, it's not the absence of a negative. A positive isn't to be finally rid of this fear or anxiety. That's relief, but it's not a true positive. A positive isn't the absence of a bad feeling or the absence of a disability or dysfunction. It is the accomplishment or experiencing of the positive aspiration, being great at something, being able to do something well, being able to do things with good feelings and energy and accomplishment. These are positives. So these are the things. Let me try and give you an example. I'm going to make one up. If we say that the negative condition being addressed for a particular client would be, I can't speak up and be myself in front of a group of people. Okay, so then the positive would be, I am very comfortable in my own skin and inspiring, creative, constructive, and highly helpful leader of people. That would be an example. Or being great with people, however the individual himself would phrase it. But you see, that would be a positive, as opposed to just saying, not afraid to be in front of people. Okay, that can be considered good, but I mean, it's not a true positive, because it's merely the absence of a negative. So I have, from research I've done into, sort of what I call open research into anything and everything, didn't take long to discover and understand that if you just dig and dig and dig for more negatives, well, that is an endless search, okay? Because there can always be more negatives. I know that Scientologists, if they believe that, like it says in the Dianetics book, that you've kind of got this this organized compartment called the reactive mind, and this reactive mind contains all the painful, traumatic, fearful experiences. And through Dianetics, the idea is to completely empty out that container, get to the very plug at the bottom, and it all runs out. And they call that basic, the basic incident, the basic to the incident that is basic to all traumatic incidents. And, well, it's more theoretical than factual, because that's supposed to result in a state of clear, which is described and then redefined many times in Dianetics and Scientology, but it's almost like a state of grace. There's simply no more negatives. They've all been flushed out, so then there can be no more unwanted, undesirable feelings or sensations. Of course, there's no such thing, because it's not that way. It's not like you empty out this container and then they're all gone. That's not how it works. But anyway, the real point here is you need to build on the positives, reconnect with your aspirations. That's what's really important. And that's what will get you to where you really want to be, not merely the absence of negatives. As I said, you can always find more negatives, but you want to be connected with and driven by what you want to accomplish, your aspirations, your positive goals, your dreams. And if these are left out of the process, as effective as power processing was in its original form, it's only at best half the accomplishment of what can be accomplished by addressing the underlying positives, which of course are the most important thing at all. I mean, we've all come across the idea of being positive. Well, I think any therapeutic approach should take that in mind, to address the positives, put attention on the positives, reconnect with the energies of the positives, the great feelings, the effortlessness, the serenity, the enthusiasm, the joy, the feeling of accomplishment, and knowing I can do this. Okay? So that needs to be part of the process. I mean, in my evolving from the strictures and form of what was original in Scientology called power processing, those changes I've made, which I've covered some of, not all of, but it became time to rename the technique, because it's not power processing. It's not what is known as power processing anymore. It's beyond that. It's much more impactful, much more pervasive, and I use the term now resolution technique. But I want all of those friends of mine and people who have involvement or interest in Dianetics, Scientology, to understand that the technique of Dianetics in any and every form, no matter how new and improved it's been trumpeted to be, was basically made obsolete in 1965 with the advent of power processing. That's a fact. Power processing addresses and resolves the basic energy of the condition being addressed. And that energy can be expressed through any number of incidents. And through the technique of power processing, it's not necessary to go back and recall the details or even necessarily go through every related incident that has the same energy. Some of these are going to come up all by themselves without directing the person to recall or go back to anything in particular other than address and be open to the energies and feelings and images and experiences of the unwanted condition. That's all that's necessary. It's the fact of the energies being the same through all those related incidents. That's the important thing. It's the energies that you're feeling that are replicating, that you're resisting and holding in place by resisting them. Okay? And that's why you address your own counter efforts to those energies. And this is why it is far more direct and pervasive than finding a traumatic incident of some particular type or character and then finding an earlier similar one, which we know now simply means it contains the same feelings or energies. Okay? So again, that is why and how power processing is far more direct and far more effective, because all you need to deal with is the actual energies themselves. But then resolution technique, as I've evolved it now, is far more effective even than power processing, because now we're getting back to the root of the positive underlying aspirations and reconnecting with those instead of just vacuuming off the negative end of it. You would have to experience it to appreciate it. And that's what I'm here for. So I hope you enjoyed this talk. And if you'd like to know more or experience this or other things that I offer, you know where to find me. Thanks for listening and watching.